Well, Margaret Brennan is in our Washington bureau with more on this. Margaret, it almost feels like I've sort of entered a time machine. Some of the phrasing and the rhetoric that we're hearing now. It has been decades since a president has called for the expansion of our nuclear arsenal. Now we have President-elect Donald Trump saying, let it be an arms race. Just what are the implications here?
Well, they're tremendous because the president of the United States, who will be Donald Trump on January 20th, is the only person authorized to launch America's nuclear weapons. That's why commanders-in-chief really choose their words very carefully when they're talking about this. So what's significant about this tweet, and as you repeated for us, those comments apparently made to another network, is that this is the first articulation of any kind of nuclear policy we've heard from Donald Trump since his election. So while his aides are explaining that what he really meant was about stopping nuclear proliferation and modernizing our nuclear arsenal, something President Obama has also talked about and is doing, that's not what Donald Trump said himself. And that is not what the rest of the world heard him say. And words really matter when you are the leader of the free world, because you set the agenda for the rest of the globe.
So now it comes back to this conversation about, do you take him literally? Do you take him seriously? You know, we heard in your piece that Mr. Trump's tweet came after Vladimir Putin basically said the same thing about Russia, that Russia's nuclear arsenal needs to be strengthened as well. So was this a peek into a policy change, or do you think it was just a reaction to what Vladimir Putin had to say?
It's really hard to know because we haven't heard from the president-elect himself beyond those very cryptic, very short descriptions of his view of nuclear policy. We do know what his aides are saying, but their language doesn't match up. If what his aides are saying, that this is truly about stopping nuclear proliferation, that this is about modernizing our nuclear arsenal, not expanding it, then that is in line with President Obama's existing strategy. And what he has said is a goal to really get rid of loose nukes. You have countries like Pakistan who are continuing to expand their nuclear arsenal. You have Russia modernizing theirs. So there is a continued nuclear threat around the world, even though here in America we often talk about it in the past tense, in light of the Cold War and the end of it. This continues to be an ongoing threat, particularly concerned about nuclear material ending up in the hands of terrorists. We haven't heard that level of nuance, detail, or policy because Donald Trump really hasn't articulated what his foreign policy views are just yet.
Right. It just so happens that today President Putin was holding his year-end press conference. Did he have any response, any reaction to some of what Donald Trump is saying?
We'll talk about press conferences. I think Vladimir Putin's went on for longer than 3 hours, taking questions from the press there in Russia. And he said a few things. One of them was, really dismissing the intelligence community's assessment that Moscow hacked and tried to interfere with the U.S. election. But he also said, as to Donald Trump, he spoke positively about him and said no one believed that Donald Trump would win except for us. It's not clear what he meant by that, but it's sure to feed the conspiracy theorists who are talking about that Russian interference and whether or not it was truly meant or not to throw the U.S. election. What U.S. intelligence has said, it was certainly meant to interfere and perhaps also to tip the scales towards a candidate they liked more than Hillary Clinton, who was very belligerent and aggressive in the view of Vladimir Putin in pushing back against some of his policies she viewed as threats to U.S. national security.
Boy, oh boy, certainly knows how to drop just enough to stir the pot. Margaret Brennan in Washington, thank you so much. We appreciate the time that you spent with us.